It would be a tall order to match the past 24 hours on the Denali Highway with a willow ptarmigan, and in Fairbanks staying in a bus so that we could see a boreal owl. But it's a good thing we were headed on the highway to Denali National Park. This is one of a few locations that definitely could match the past 24 hours with all of the wildlife watching we would have. Before our scheduled bus departure, we had to visit the dog kennels for the sled dogs. Mike had done this on previous visits and was adamant that we do it too. It was so much fun being able to pet the dogs and learn about how they run sled dogs in the winter. The only way to drive into the park is by bus, and you had to reserve a spot on the bus well in advance. Masking regulations were still in effect due to COVID-19. The bus takes you from the visitor center all the way through several different overlooks and stops where you take a break to the Eelson Visitor Center, 66 miles from the entrance. Unfortunately, the road beyond the Eelson Visitor Center was closed to Wonder Lake. While Mike and I have a particular interest in birds, while at Denali, it's hard to deny that we love to see all the wildlife, including bears, caribou, and of course, a golden eagle would be great. But the scenery was impressive, and we were there to see it all. As we drove, spruce forests quickly gave way to alpine tundra, where the spruce trees were scattered across an open landscape. Our first stop was at the Teclanica River. While enjoying this beautiful vista, Mike and I couldn't help but notice the bird life. In the spruce tree right at the overlook was a Canada jay. A little further up the road, someone spotted white specks on the mountainside. When we zoomed in with our cameras and our binoculars, we saw a group of Dall sheep. While similar to and belonging to the same genus as our more familiar bighorn sheep, Dall sheep are white in color, and their horns are thinner and spread wider from their heads. They also range much farther north than bighorn sheep. The bus again came to a stop as we were passing by a herd of caribou. Caribou range in the subpolar regions all the way around the globe, and in Europe are referred to as reindeer. Soon, the terrain the road was traversing became very treacherous. There were steep cliffs on one side heading down into the valley, and very steep cliffs heading up to the mountain tops to the other side. Our next stop was at Polychrome Pass, where we took another scenic vista and were given the opportunity to go for a little hike. While traversing the terrain, we were always on the lookout for our second willow ptarmigan of the trip, hopeful that the one we saw a few days ago wouldn't be the only one. In episode 4, we had finally broken Mike's curse of not having ever seen a ptarmigan in 3 previous trips to Alaska. Now that we had broken the curse, I figured we'd start seeing ptarmigan all over the place, especially since we were now in one of the best places to look for ptarmigan, Denali. Along the way, we had been conversing with the other passengers on the bus. They quickly became aware of our being birders and naturally our desire to see a ptarmigan. As we described the bird, it became apparent that we were some of only a few people on the bus that had not yet seen a ptarmigan. The people sitting in front of Mike had just seen one at the Polychrome Pass stop when we were only a very short distance away, but they didn't know to call us over to see it. Then the couple in front of me turned around and revealed that they had seen one from the bus window alongside the road. Later, another couple boarded the bus after hiking and told us a story of how they had come across a ptarmigan nest. For the rest of the trip, our fellow passengers were all trying to help us find a ptarmigan and would ask, "Now, what did you call that bird again?" The two people on the bus who most wanted to see a ptarmigan were denied by Denali. Our next stop was at the Tolkat River rest area. The continued low cloud cover caused us to fear being denied a second and perhaps more important and iconic sight in the park, the Peak of Denali. Lucky for us, we were distracted by more wildlife viewing as we spotted our first pair of grizzly bears. In the end, we tallied an amazing 6 individual bears seen during the bus tour, exceeding everyone's expectations.
He's laying down.
And the wildlife sightings didn't stop there. They just continued one after another.
No binoculars needed.
Next, we were thrilled to watch a fox hunt for Arctic ground squirrels by digging in their burrow. What an amazing National Geographic moment. Just when we thought it couldn't get any better, the driver came over the speaker saying he had just received word that the Peak of Denali had become visible. And our next stop was just around the corner at the Eelson Visitor Center, where we would have the closest view of the peak possible. As we rounded the corner, silence fell in the bus as we all stared in anticipation. Where was the peak? We were not seeing it. The driver then said, "You are all looking way too low." As our gaze rose, an audible gasp came over the bus as we realized the mountain peak was sticking up out of the clouds. At 20,308 feet in elevation, we should have expected it to be much higher than we were looking. Filled with joyful emotion, we could not take our eyes off this most beautiful of views. This was the culmination of a wonderful Denali experience, made all the sweeter by the fact that we were not expecting to see the peak at all. The sun continued to shine brighter as the clouds continued to clear, making the scenery come alive. Mike and I were on cloud 9 with this unforgettable mountaintop experience. But, as with all good things, we had to draw this one to a close as the bus was ready to take us back. As we rode past Polychrome Pass once again, we were on the lookout for a gyrfalcon. On a previous trip, Mike had seen one here perched on a rock formation, obviously marked as a favorite roosting spot, as shown in his photo. As we drove past the rock formation, a falcon-shaped bird powered past us in flight, but in the opposite direction of the bus, giving us only a split-second view. The chances it was anything other than a gyrfalcon are pretty slim, but I really wish I could have gotten a better view. Lucky for us, the raptor watching wasn't over, and a little further down the road we spotted a golden eagle gliding overhead. Seeing it in flight was great, but that wasn't all. After losing sight of it and coming around the corner, we found it sitting on the ground next to the road for the best look I've ever had at a golden eagle. The bus had now reached the most treacherous stretch of the park's road, where we'd have to drive over a slow-moving rock glacier landslide. Influenced by warming temperatures melting underlying supportive ice, this rock glacier has been in a slow-motion downslope movement since 2016. It was a very eerie feeling to drive this section of the road, knowing we were driving over an active landslide. A couple months after our visit, the National Park Service decided it could not keep up the repairs and closed the road down to build a bridge. It is not scheduled to reopen until 2026, leaving half the park's road inaccessible by vehicle. Before the conclusion of the bus trip, Denali had more in store for us. This young bull moose took a bath in front of us all, as if we weren't even there. And then promptly trotted off to the road to block our path for a bit before letting us move on. And as if we hadn't had enough good luck, the proverbial pot of gold was reserved for the end. A full double rainbow stretched across the sky and felt as close and three-dimensional as I've ever viewed one. It was truly magical. On our way out of Denali, the wildlife viewing did not stop. This porcupine crossed the road in front of us and gave us great views. It must have been very confident that its spines would protect it, as it did not seem a bit afraid of us. As we traveled south toward Anchorage, the sun went down and the clouds continued to clear, revealing a spectacular Denali sunset. We camped at a roadside stop in Denali State Park and woke to sunshine and this northern water thrush singing non-stop from the top of this spruce tree. With the clouds gone, the view of the peak of Denali was now unobstructed and as beautiful as ever. 70% of visitors to Denali do not get to see the peak. So I guess you could say we were now a part of the official 30% club. After arriving in Anchorage and doing a quick tour to drive over the ridgeline created by the 1964 earthquake, and of course a quick birding stop, we had to succumb to the inevitable, boarding the airplane for the flight home. We soaked in every last minute of mountains and glaciers that we could before only darkness could block our view. Thank you so much for joining Mike and I on our adventure, birding in Alaska. In case you haven't tuned in for the other 4 episodes, click the link to view the playlist.